Gacha games wouldn't function without their characters. With their heavy integration into the game's overall story, the incredible appeal of their visual design, and the need to spend in-game resources or cold hard cash to pull them, a game's characters are what ultimately determines its success. However, one thing that all of these gacha games have in common is that there's a main character, a protagonist who takes charge, leading the narrative across the game's story. These main characters are oftentimes depicted as some of the most powerful in the game's lore, especially in their cutscenes. But their actual gameplay can leave a lot to be desired. You can't make your free characters too strong, right? Otherwise, what incentive would there be to pull for the limited ones? However, what if I told you there was a gacha game and a developer that broke the mold when it came to the design of their main character? Rather than a permanent benchwarmer in virtually every situation, or a kit so specific that it only works in one team that also requires multiple 5-star limited characters, Kuro Games decided that their main character, Rover, was actually going to be a unit that wasn't a complete joke. A unit that has some drawbacks, sure, especially in comparison to their limited counterparts, but also one with some of the most absurd advantages in the game. This is 25% crit rate, after all. When it comes to the design of Rover, in both their Spectro and Havoc counterparts, Kuro hit it out of the park. Today we'll be breaking down why this is the case, diving into their well-defined team roles all the way to their incredible synergy with existing or upcoming members of the cast. Rover is a character that every player should have built on their account, both for their current potential and their upcoming ones in the future. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Spectro Rover was the very first character that every player used in Wuthering Waves, with a smooth baseline kit focused on a simple forte circuit that buffs their resonance skill, nuanced ways to charge that circuit through held inputs during their basic attacks, and potentially one of the easiest parry windows in the game. Spectro Rover was a great introduction to the combat mechanics of Wuthering Waves. However, what many players realized was that Rover didn't have a lot of sustained damage, and wasn't a great character to stack all of your team's buffs on. That's because, well, they're a sub DPS that focuses on increasing the damage potential of others, and they do this in one of the most unique ways possible. Spectro Rover's outro skill can appear unnoticeable at first. Activating this ability dramatically slows down nearby enemy actions by a significant amount. While this outro skill deals no damage and doesn't directly buff a teammate's abilities, this outro skill provides something almost no other character does: crowd control. It's a lot easier to deal damage if the enemy is momentarily transformed into a giant punching bag. Combine that with the buff from Moonlit Clouds and Spectro Rover's above average concerto energy generation, and you have a fantastic combination that gives a player a lot more utility over raw damage buffs. However, once we start looking into Spectro Rover's dupes that you get for free, this story changes, and their team roles become a lot more flexible as well. At S4, Rover becomes a team-wide healer after casting their Resonance Liberation, and at S6, they inflict a massive spectral resistance debuff on any enemy hit with their Resonance skill. When that skill has a cooldown of 6 seconds, this debuff has basically permanent uptime. What this means is that Spectro Rover is actually one of the best teammates you can have for a character like Jinsei, and they could also have some synergies with Shorekeeper, confirmed as a Spectro unit, that will have some unique party buffs when paired with Rover. When you pair Jinsei with Spectro Rover, you can slot Verena in on another team. When Verena is one of the most hotly contested picks, and Baija has one of the most unappealing playstyles in the game, this is roster flexibility that gives a huge amount of value and resource savings to a player, especially if you skip out on building Baija entirely. That's mainly because when you build Spectro Rover, you also build the other 5 versions of them, and one of the versions in the game right now, Havoc Rover, they're shaping up to be one of the best DPS characters in the game. With a kit that blends together an incredible bursty playstyle through their Resonance Liberation, a Resonance skill that refreshes and stance changes through their Forte circuit, and buffed basic attacks once that circuit is active, Havoc Rover can take on an absurd number of roles with a huge number of characters on the roster. They have a hyper carry team that capitalizes on the massive damage amplification provided by Danjin. They have an incredible number of dual DPS compositions when paired with characters like Zhang Liao Xiao, Changli, Encore, or even Calcharo, and with how equally split their overall damage profile is, they can benefit from virtually any outro skill in the game, but won't necessarily have a best-in-slot sub-DPS besides Dan Jin. They're truly a jack of all trades, and that makes them one of the most valuable characters in the game from a team-building perspective. However, this is their spot in the meta when they don't even have all of the tools available to them yet, and that's the rest of their sequence nodes. We only have the first 3 Havoc Rover nodes, and that's a terrible shame because their last 3 are some of the most absurdly powerful in the game. S3 is very similar to Spectro Rover's S6, granting a massive Havoc resistance debuff with an insane duration on attacks that they'll be constantly using in their kit. S5 simply adds more damage to their basic attacks, and their S6 might be one of the most broken upgrades I've seen. This node just gives your rover 25% crit rate while their Forte circuit is active. 25% crit rate is more than what's on a fully upgraded 4-cost Echo. 25% crit rate is more than what's on a fully upgraded 5-star limited weapon. 25% crit rate is a lot, and we'll be getting it for completely free. This upgrade alone will make Havoc Rover one of the easiest characters to build in the game. And when nearly every player has a copy of Emerald of Genesis from either their free weapon box at UL 45 or through pulls on the standard banner, your Havoc Rover will have a baseline crit of around 54% without a single substat on their echoes. With the ability to buff Havoc damage across their team, these next few nodes are going to dramatically increase the power of Rover's hypercarry team with Dan Jin. And if Camellia is a Havoc character, which is very likely considering all of her visuals point in that direction, and we haven't gotten the limited Havoc 5-star yet, this version of Rover is likely going to pair very well with her in the future. Kuro decided that their main character was going to be strong, and some would question whether or not that was a good business decision. Making free characters too powerful could lead to less limited sales, right? However, Kuro also decided that this strong, free character would also have amazing built-in synergies with their limited releases, and that just adds a lot more incentive to pull on those limited banners. We have never seen a main character this powerful, and when your main character is actually good in-game, that adds a lot more credibility to the insane things that they're doing in the story. Rover, from all we've seen, is a certified badass, and they've earned that title from their performance in-game. Just imagine what the next 4 attributes have in store. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.